Hey, it's Rick, aka Concrete River on the Reddits. So after comparing the viewership numbers for last week with Fuji Apples and the week before with Sriracha, it was really clear that people just want to see me in pain. In order to give people what they want, I'm going to go ahead and do a deep dive on a flavor that I actually really enjoy. um, Today I wanted to talk about FLV Pink Guava. So I've got a tasting of it, and then I have 4 recipes in front of me that sort of utilize it in different ways that I think are pretty good examples of everything that you can do with this flavor. Starting out, I'm going to go ahead and start with Pink Guava at 0.5%. And I'm fairly familiar with this flavor, but we'll just play along like I'm not, right? So, the first thing that you kind of notice about Pink Guava is it doesn't really seem to be a guava flavor, strictly speaking, or at least not a guava flavor in the same vein of something like Capella Sweet Guava, which is usually like the point of comparison for guava flavors. This is a lot less sort of mellow, flat, and sweet, if that makes any sense. I like Capella Sweet Guava. I use a lot of Capella Sweet Guava. But it's not the most complicated flavor. And there's definitely a lot going on with FLV Pink Guava. So trying it at 0.5%, you get a lot of grapefruit. And you actually hear that quite a bit in reference to this flavor, that it's more of a grapefruit flavor than a pink guava flavor. And at low percentages, I definitely tend to agree with that. The one thing that I sort of get from it isn't necessarily a full grapefruit. Instead, it's almost like a Cascade hops. And the hops thing keeps on coming up for me. It has this really interesting sort of bitter hoppy top end to it. It actually smells like if you've there's a couple IPAs, and I'm way out of the drinking game by this point, but so I couldn't name them. But if you ever get your face down an IPA, generally what you'll smell is like a lot of that hops, and there's a whole lot of like citrus in there. And Cascade hops are kind of renowned for having kind of a grapefruit note to them. And to me, at low percentages, that's exactly what this tastes like, is the grapefruit note from Cascade hops. You get a lot of tartness off of it, which is nice. Tart is kind of hard to do well in a flavor, and I feel like this does tart well without really messing too much with the other flavors underneath, like a sour would, something based on like malic acid or citric acid. Generally at low percentages, what you're mostly going to get is sort of like a grapefruit zest with kind of like a hops back note on it. So bumping that up to 2%. If I could manage to pour reasonably quickly. So the top of this flavor at 2% tastes a lot like the top of the flavor at 0.5%. You still have that sort of grapefruit zest, hoppy, slightly bitter flavor to it. And then underneath, you're actually starting to get like a good deal more sweetness and body. The sweetness here actually kind of plays to the grapefruit thing pretty well. It kind of tastes like the tangible difference between a grapefruit and like a ruby red grapefruit, or like a navel orange and a blood orange. It's that like slightly earthy, like a little bit sweeter. It's really nice actually. And then I get some tropical fruit towards the back end. Tropical fruit for me is hard. Just because I'm not exactly a world traveler, and so most of my experience of tropical fruit has been filtered through, the semi-suburban white guy grocery store nonsense. But Um, you definitely get something that tastes a little bit tart, like a pineapple, almost like kind of a juicy mango kind of taste. I've heard it described before is there's also like a white grape lychee note in there, and I could definitely see that. But yeah, the flavor tends to get a little bit more complex as you start building up with it. So at that lower percentage, you're going to be using it as an accent, like at 0.25%, 0.5%, somewhere around there. Mostly what you'll get is that kind of hoppy citrus. And then as you start building up with it, you'll start to get more of a low end on the flavor. And some of those like really interesting tropical fruits will start to come through. There'll be a good deal of sweetness out of it. It actually gets a little bit heavy in terms of sweetness. Generally it helps if you're going to solo flavor it, if you want to go ahead and like throw in some culotta or something in there just to kind of like clean up the back end of the exhale, because it kind of sticks to your mouth a little bit. um, but yeah, you definitely get a lot more tropical fruit off of it at 2%, which is usually about where I top out with it. If I'm single flavor, if I'm using it as a single flavor, I'll usually bump up to about 3%. And then it does have a little bit of harshness to it, which is unfortunate, but it's pretty easily remedied if you go ahead and add like 0.25% ethyl maltol. Just something that I kind of take like the sting out of it. It doesn't really do much for sweetness at that level, but it does tend to sort of make the entire thing a little bit less harsh, which is nice. At 4%, as I drastically over drip. Okay, let's try that again. At 4%. So at 4%, this is actually pretty aggressive. Um, Again, I don't really notice all that much more bitterness in the top end. The top end seems like it comes in pretty strong down low and then just kind of carries through. But that you're getting more fruit in the base, and there's like this sort of tropical muskiness to it underneath all that tropical fruit sweetness. Um, which sounds like it would be a bad thing, but it's really intriguing the way that it plays with sort of the sweet and the bitter with it. Like overall, it's a really nicely balanced and interesting concentrate. Um, so people have complained before that this can be a little bit of a bully, that it tends to take over mixes. And I mean, I'm one step away from drinking this stuff straight. So I don't necessarily see that as too much of a problem. But it does tend to get pretty aggressive as you sort of crank it up, and the harshness does scale a little bit. It also, sort of above 2%, that sort of sweetness that I'm talking about, that tropical fruit sweetness kind of builds a little bit, and it tends to get a little bit cloying and kind of wear on you. So if you are going to push it up into those higher levels, um, I'd pretty much call the culotta like a necessity. It kind of helps to clear out your palate at the end of the exhale and keeps it from like really just building up there. But the tropical fruit flavors from Flavora are interesting. A lot of their stuff is incredibly concentrated. Like use under 0.5% concentrated, maybe percent if you're pushing it. But I've found that there's a lot more headroom in their tropical fruits. You can push their custard apples, their guanabana, their soursop, their cherimoya. All those do fairly well at higher percentages, and I think their pink guava also does pretty well at a higher percentage. Because you're definitely still getting, it's still adding more. It's still adding more sweetness, more fullness, instead of like going full on chemical, um, or blowing everything out like a lot of flavors will if you over flavor like that. Um, I will say my usable limit for pink guava, generally it's kind of a cost benefit thing. It's not the cheapest concentrate in the world, and I don't really get much out of it past 3% that I don't get at 3%, so I usually end up stopping there. Mixing with it, it's kind of all dependent on what you want to do with it. So I am going to take a drink of water. So I do have 4 recipes in front of me that I'll use pink guava in different ways, and I'll go ahead and put links in the description because that's something I hear people on YouTube say. So I will go ahead and do that. But I have 2 of my own mixes and then 2 from other mixers. So I'm going to start with my mix Fiestas and Fiascos, which is not a really representational mix of anything in particular. It kind of came from playing around with mouthfeel. I've gone over it before, and honestly, everybody's probably a little bit sick of hearing it. But I'll put a link down in there. But it uses pink guava at 1% to sort of play off of Capella's sweet guava, and then Flavора's Yakima hops. And so the idea is to kind of make a really intriguing, bitter, sweet, juicy, like thick, chewy flavor. So trying some of that. Again, this is pink guava at 1%. So I already said the thing about pink guava kind of having a hops note to it, and adding it back in with more hops, specifically Flavора's Yakima hops. It kind of creates a really nice full hop note. It takes some of those like piney, like rosiny notes from Flavора's Yakima hops, which is just kind of like a straight hop, and it adds in sort of those grapefruit top notes, and it really is doing some interesting things against like the sweeter, flatter Capella Sweet Guava. There's also some vanilla swirl and some Lorraine's cream cheese icing in there, and if you're gonna mix pink guava with any kind of cream, or quote unquote cream, I would stay away from anything with a heavy dairy note. It doesn't really play well with anything buttery or eggy. It gets really weird really quickly, and it's best to sort of stay away from those. So I'd stay away from like Flavor Arts fresh cream, TPS sweet cream, anything that actually has a good amount of real dairy. So as a dairy substitute in there, it tends to work really well with coconuts, which give you some creaminess. And then if you are going to go down the cream path, TPA's vanilla swirl works really well with it. It gives you some creaminess, and the extra maltol kind of helps round off the sharp edges on there. Yeah, it gives you an awesome mouthfeel too, which is great. I mean, when in doubt, just add more vanilla swirl. But it works well with marshmallow flavors. It will work with like DIY Flavor Shack's Holy Vanilla. It actually works pretty well with. That one has a little bit of malt to it, but it doesn't seem to disagree with the pink guava all that much. And if you want a shameless plug, so Bull City Flavors actually has a flavor pack available for Fiestas and Fiascos. So I will also link that because I have full control of those sort of things. So moving on to another mix of mine. This is my recipe Terrorhawk. So it kind of exploits the grapefruit in pink guava more than anything else. So this uses pink guava up at 2%, which gives you a lot of those top notes and some of the extra sweetness and that kind of like undefinable ruby red, whatever the hell that difference is. It uses it on top of 3% Flavor West Ruby Red Grapefruit, and then a little bit of Inawera white grapefruit in the background. So you already have that grapefruit base, and so the idea with the pink guava is to sort of come in and fill out that grapefruit that you're building. And it does a really good job of that. Again, this recipe is sort of balanced with vanilla swirl, and this one has vanilla shisha in there too, by Inawera to kind of give all that citrus, that bitterness, something to play off of. And I think it does a pretty good job of conveying a full grapefruit. It definitely, when you pair it with grapefruit, it doesn't not taste like grapefruit. It tends to add to the essential grapefruitness of what you're mixing it with, which is really nice. So yeah, Flavora's Pink Guava. If you want to use it as a grapefruit, throw another grapefruit in there and kind of let it work its magic. It works really well. So moving on to recipes that are not my own. Recipe that I'm a big fan of, NotCharlesManson's guava lime candy. And so this recipe uses pink guava at 0.25% with a whole lot of limes, and I absolutely love this recipe. I think the pink guava manages to add something really special to all of the lime in there. It kind of fills it out, sweetens it a little bit, and sort of gives it that like hoppy, like mouth-watering quality. And so with for a recipe with 4% Cabela's lemon lime, 0.25% Inawera lime, it's kind of amazing exactly how much of the guava you end up tasting. Some of that's down to Inawera's dragon fruit flavor, which it uses at 1%, which helps to smooth the entire thing out. And that has some of those same kind of like tropical pineapple-y mango top notes. So those kind of reinforce each other. But you definitely, even at 0.25%, you definitely get like that sort of bright burst of hops bitterness in there that kind of makes the entire thing like mouth-watering and kind of sells the idea that it sells that hard candy texture more than anything else. Yeah, I absolutely love this stuff. It's one of the recipes from other mixers that I have gone back and mixed repeatedly. I really enjoy the guava lime candy. So the last mix that I have, let me go ahead and clear this out. The last mix that I have is kind of a derivation of Bot Boy from Reddit. A while ago at this point, I don't think he's still active. He was a big fan of Pink Guava, and he was trying to approach how to sort of tame it. Like I was saying before, it has a reputation for being kind of a bully in mixes. And so he took 3% Flavora Pink Guava and then just came straight at it with 1.5% Lychee by Flavora, which is another really aggressive flavor. I do not have the Loran's Guava for this recipe, and I mixed it without it. I'm sure it adds something. From the reviews that I've read, it's sort of more similar to like Capella's Sweet Guava in that same kind of family where you're talking about like heavy, sweet, flat. But this uses 0.5% of Inawera's Raspberry, which is another great pairing with Pink Guava. And then a 0.25% of Culotta, which is actually really nice because you're talking about some really sweet, aggressive flavors, and it helps to clear the palate at the end. So, trying some of that. Yeah, that lychee and that pink guava seem like they're pretty much made for each other. I feel like the pink guava kind of makes the lychee a little grapier, which is nice. It kind of takes that white grape note that lychee has and sort of pushes it up to the front. Tends to tame a lot of the floral stuff going on with the lychee too, and then the lychee actually seems to like thin out the pink guava at 3% and make it just a little bit less cloying. The raspberry actually works really well in there. It brings in not even so much the sweetness, but it adds another dimension to the flavor, which is nice. It's a sweet mix overall, and that extra dimension really helps the entire thing from getting cloying. And then the Culotta at 0.25%. For me, at least, I mean, I don't get anything that I'd really report as like an icy sensation. It just adds a little bit of cooling to the back end to help keep everything clean. I will say I think adding the guava back in here would sort of mellow this out even more, which is probably a good thing for overall palatability. But this mix really shows a lot of the really interesting parts of pink guava and lychee, Flores lychee, and sort of lets them shine for what they are, which are really interesting tropical flavors. So, if you're looking at Flores Pink Guava and have no idea what to do with it, or are on the fence about picking it up, I hope that helps in some way. Um, yeah, like I said, I'm a big fan. I don't think there's really a point in hiding it at this point. Um, yeah, and I like it. I like the bitterness. I like the tartness. I like the balance on the entire thing. I could single flavor it if I had to pick one flavor pretty much to be stuck with beyond, cooling. This is probably in the running for one of my favorite flavors. So this will be going up attached to a companion review over at Reddit, which I will actually go ahead and link if you want to hear my thoughts about it in a slightly more coherent and organized manner than just having me inhale things and rattle it off at a camera. But thank you for watching.